People always say that families come together when someone gets sick. Mine did the exact opposite. The morning my grandfather suffered a stroke, my phone started ringing before sunrise. I answered, half asleep, expecting bad news from the hospital. Instead, I heard my older brother Ethan. "We've all talked," he said, without even asking how I was doing. "We think it's best if you move into Grandpa's farmhouse." I sat up in bed. "What?" "Someone has to take care of him. I have a full-time job." "So, you're single." Those 3 words landed harder than anything else. "You're single." Seen? As if that automatically meant my life mattered less than everyone else's. Within 2 hours, my parents, my sister Rachel, and Ethan had already decided my future without asking me. Mom folded her arms. "Ethan has a wife and 2 kids. Rachel just started her business. Your father still works 60 hours a week." Then she looked directly at me. "You don't have those responsibilities." I laughed, not because it was funny, because I realized no one in that room saw my career, my apartment, or my plants as important. Dad finally spoke. "It'll only be for a little while." A little while. That's what they all said. Grandpa Henry had lived alone in the old farmhouse ever since. Grandma passed away 8 years earlier. The place sat at the edge of town, surrounded by wheat fields and towering oak trees. When I was a little girl, I loved that house. It smelled like fresh coffee, old books, and cedar wood. Grandpa taught me how to fish, how to fix broken furniture, how to bake apple pie without burning the crust. He never raised his voice, never complained, never asked anyone for anything. Now, he couldn't even speak. The stroke had stolen almost everything. The hospital discharged him 4 days later. My family arrived together, but something felt strange. Nobody argued over who would drive him home. Nobody offered to stay the first night. Instead, everyone looked at me. Rachel handed me a folder. "These are his medications." Dad passed me a list. Doctor appointments. Mom gave me a grocery list. Before I realized what was happening, they were loading Grandpa into my car. Ethan clapped me on the shoulder. "You're doing the right thing." Then, one by one, they drove away. I stood beside Grandpa's wheelchair, watching their cars disappear down the road. None of them even looked back. The farmhouse was quieter than I remembered. Too quiet. The old clock in the hallway echoed through every room. Tick, tick, tick. Grandpa slowly looked around the house. His eyes filled with tears. I squeezed his hand. "I'm here." He smiled. It was weak, but it was enough. That first week became my entire life. Wake up at 6. Help Grandpa get dressed. Cook breakfast. Physical therapy. Medicine. Laundry. Cleaning. Dinner. Repeat. I work remotely whenever he slept. Most nights, I fell asleep sitting beside his chair. Meanwhile, my family's social media told a different story. Rachel posted photos from expensive restaurants, finally taking some time for myself. Ethan uploaded pictures from a weekend fishing trip. Family comes first. I stared at my phone in disbelief. Family comes first? Really? Because I hadn't seen either of them once all week. Not once. Only one person showed up. Mrs. Alvarez, Grandpa's 80-year-old neighbor. She brought homemade soup every Tuesday. "I know your family is busy," she said gently. The way she emphasized busy told me she knew exactly what was happening. One afternoon, while Grandpa slept in his chair, she quietly asked, "Have they been helping?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She already knew. 3 weeks passed. Not a single visit. No phone calls to Grandpa. No offers to give me a break. Nothing. Ethan suddenly appeared. He wasn't carrying groceries. He wasn't carrying flowers. He wasn't carrying Grandpa's favorite pie. Instead, he walked straight into Grandpa's office. The one room Grandpa had always kept locked. He tried the doorknob. Locked. He frowned. Then he looked around to make sure I wasn't watching. I stayed hidden in the hallway. From my pocket, I quietly pulled out my phone and started recording. Because something told me my brother hadn't come to see Grandpa at all. He'd come looking for something else. Just before Ethan left, I heard him whisper into his phone, "If the journal is still in that house, we have to find it before Grandpa dies." I froze. What journal? And why was my own brother so desperate to get it before? Grandpa could say another word. I didn't sleep that night. After Ethan left, his whispered words kept replaying in my head. If the journal is still in that house, we have to find it before Grandpa dies. A journal. Not money. Not a deed. Not a safe. A journal. I lay awake on the old sofa beside Grandpa's bedroom, listening to the rain tap against the farmhouse windows. Every creak of the old house sounded louder than usual. Why would Ethan care about an old notebook? And why did he think Grandpa had hidden it? The next morning, I tried to push the thought aside. Grandpa needed breakfast, his medication, and another round of physical therapy. His recovery was painfully slow. He still couldn't speak clearly, but every day he seemed a little more determined. As I helped him into his favorite chair near the fireplace, his eyes drifted toward the hallway, toward his office. He stared at the closed door for several seconds before looking back at me. Then he slowly lifted his trembling hand. His finger pointed toward the office again. "You want to go in there?" I asked softly. He nodded. The office hadn't been open since the day Grandpa came home from the hospital. He always kept it locked. As a child, I had only been inside twice. I unlocked the door. The familiar scent of cedar wood, old paper, and coffee filled the room. Nothing had changed. The massive oak desk still stood beside the window. Bookshelves lined every wall. An old globe rested in the corner. Family photographs covered the fireplace mantel. Grandpa looked around the room with watery eyes. He reached toward the desk. I rolled his wheelchair closer. He slowly opened the top drawer. Inside were neatly organized letters, reading glasses, old receipts, and an empty space. A perfect rectangle in the dust. Something had clearly been sitting there for years. Something that was now missing. Grandpa frowned. His breathing became faster. He searched the drawer again. Nothing. Then he looked at me. His eyes filled with panic. He shook his head over and over. "No?" I asked. He nodded. "No." "Gone?" Again he nodded. Whatever had been in that drawer, it wasn't there anymore. That afternoon, my phone rang. Rachel. I almost ignored it. "How's Grandpa?" she asked casually. "He misses everyone." Silence. Then she changed the subject. "So, have you been cleaning his office?" The question hit me like a brick. "No." "Oh." Another pause. "I was just wondering." "Why?" "No reason." She ended the call less than a minute later. I stared at the phone. Now Rachel was asking about the office too. Whatever Ethan wanted, she wanted it just as badly. That evening, Mrs. Alvarez stopped by with homemade chicken soup. She had known Grandpa for over 40 years. As we sat on the porch while Grandpa napped inside, I finally asked the question that had been haunting me. Did Grandpa ever keep a journal? Her spoon froze halfway to her mouth. For a moment, she said nothing. Finally, she sighed. So, they've started looking. My heart skipped. You know about it? She nodded slowly. Your grandfather wrote every single night. For how long? Almost 25 years. 25 years. I couldn't even imagine how many notebooks that would be. What did he write about? Mrs. Alvarez looked toward the farmhouse. Everything. Birthdays, arguments, business, promises, secrets. Then she lowered her voice. He believed memories disappear, so he wrote them down instead. I swallowed. Ethan said he needed to find one journal. Mrs. Alvarez's expression changed instantly. One journal? Yes. She looked genuinely frightened. Oh no. What? There wasn't just one journal. There were dozens. Dozens? But she leaned closer. There was one notebook your grandfather never talked about. The black leather journal. He kept it hidden. Even I never saw what was inside. A cold chill ran through me. What made it different? Mrs. Alvarez looked me directly in the eyes. Because he once told me, if anyone ever finds that journal, our family will never be the same again. At that exact moment, a loud crash echoed from inside the farmhouse. The two of us jumped to our feet. I rushed through the front door. Grandpa's office door was wide open. Drawers had been ripped out. Books were scattered across the floor. The window was still swinging open in the evening wind. Someone had been inside, and they hadn't come to steal money. They had come looking for the black leather journal. As I stared at the wrecked office, Grandpa grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. Looking straight into my eyes, he forced out 3 shaky words. Don't trust Rachel. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Grandpa's hand still gripped my wrist. His knuckles had turned white from the effort. Looking directly into my eyes, he repeated the words more clearly this time. Don't trust Rachel. Then he slumped back into his wheelchair, exhausted. Those 4 words changed everything. Rachel wasn't just avoiding Grandpa. She wasn't simply too busy. According to Grandpa, she was dangerous. The sheriff arrived 20 minutes later. He slowly walked through Grandpa's office, taking photographs of the broken drawers, scattered books, and the open window. There aren't many footprints, he said. The rain washed most of them away. He looked around the room. Nothing expensive appears to be missing. No cash. No jewelry. He looked at me. What were they looking for? A journal. The sheriff raised an eyebrow. It sounds strange. It is. But that's exactly what happened. After the sheriffs left, I began cleaning the office. Books, letters, old family photographs. Everything was scattered across the floor. As I picked up an old wooden picture frame, something slipped out from behind it. A tiny brass key. It couldn't have been longer than 2 inches. It had a faded red ribbon tied around it. Grandpa immediately pointed toward it. His eyes widened. He wanted me to keep it. I slipped the little key into my pocket. That tiny brass key stayed in my pocket all night. It wasn't the kind of key you'd use for a front door. It was old, worn smooth from years of use. Someone had tied a faded red ribbon around it, almost as if they wanted to make sure it would never be mistaken for any other key. I looked at Grandpa. He couldn't stop staring at it. Then he slowly nodded. He wanted me to use it. But where? The next morning, I made Grandpa breakfast before checking every lug in the farmhouse. Kitchen cabinets, bedroom drawers, The old cedar chest in the attic, even Grandma's sewing cabinet. Nothing fits. I was beginning to think the key belonged somewhere else entirely when Mrs. Alvarez knocked on the back door. She carried 2 fresh loaves of homemade bread. "I thought you two could use a break from cooking." She smiled warmly before noticing the exhausted look on my face. "You didn't sleep." I laughed quietly. "I don't think anyone would after yesterday." She nodded knowingly. Then I pulled a tiny brass key from my pocket. "Have you ever seen this before?" The moment she looked at it, her smile disappeared. "I haven't seen that key in years." "You recognize it?" She nodded slowly. "Your grandfather always wore it around his neck." "What is it open?" "I don't know. He never told anyone. But—" She paused. "I do remember him saying one strange thing after your grandmother passed away." "What was it?" "He said, 'One day, Emma will know which lock belongs to this key.'" A chill ran through me. Grandpa had hidden this. Years before he ever became sick, that afternoon Grandpa seemed more alert than he had in weeks. As I helped him sit on the porch, he suddenly pointed toward the old red barn behind the farmhouse. The barn hadn't been used in years. Its roof sagged. The paint had faded. Half the windows were broken. "You want to go there?" He nodded. I pushed his wheelchair slowly across the graveled path. Inside, dust floated through the sunlight. Old farming equipment stood exactly where Grandpa had left it decades ago. Everything looked abandoned, until Grandpa raised his trembling hand. He pointed toward an old grandfather clock leaning against the far wall. It was strange. Why would a grandfather clock be sitting inside a barn? I carefully opened the clock door. The pendulum was gone. The gears had rusted. Nothing. Then I remembered Dad used to tell me, old craftsmen loved hiding compartments. I gently knocked on the wooden panels. One sounded hollow. I pressed against it. Click. A narrow wooden panel slid open. Behind it was a small iron lock. My pulse quickened. I reached into my pocket. The tiny brass key fit perfectly. For a moment, I hesitated. Grandpa watched silently. Then, I turned the key. The lock clicked open. Inside the compartment sat a weathered black leather journal, exactly the size Mrs. Alvarez had described. 25 years of secrets, reduced to one ordinary-looking notebook. Grandpa closed his eyes. For the first time since his stroke, he smiled. Not because the journal had been found, because it had been found by the right person. I carefully opened the first page. Every page was filled with Grandpa's neat handwriting. Dates, names, conversations, receipts taped into the margins, old newspaper clippings, photographs. He hadn't written random memories. He had documented evidence, real evidence, page after page. Then, a folded envelope slipped from the center of the journal. Across the front were 6 handwritten words. "Open only after they betray you." My heart pounded. They. Who was they? My parents? Rachel? Ethan? All of them? I looked at Grandpa. He gave one slow nod. He wanted me to open it. Inside the envelope was a single photograph. It had been taken nearly 20 years earlier. I recognized everyone immediately. Grandpa, Grandma, Mom, Dad, Rachel, Ethan, and me. But there was someone else standing beside Grandpa. A young woman, beautiful, confident. I'd never seen her before. On the back of the photograph, Grandpa had written just one sentence. "The day our family began living a lie." Before I could ask Grandpa who she was, A truck pulled into the driveway. I looked through the barn window. Rachel climbed out. She wasn't alone. Ethan stepped out from the passenger side. Neither of them knocked. Neither of them called my name. Instead, they walked straight toward the barn, as if they already knew exactly where I was. Just before Rachel reached the barn door, I heard Ethan whisper, "If Emma found a journal, we're too late." Then Rachel answered with words that made my blood run cold. "Then we'll have to make sure she never reads the last chapter." My heart slammed against my ribs. Rachel and Ethan were only a few steps from the barn. I quickly closed the black leather journal and slipped it beneath. Grandpa's old wool blanket draped across his wheelchair. The folded envelope disappeared into my jacket pocket. By the time the barn doors creaked open, I had forced myself to smile. Rachel looked around first, too carefully, not like someone visiting family, like someone searching a crime scene. "There you are," she said, pretending to sound relieved. "We've been calling." I glanced at my silent phone. "No, you haven't." For a split second, she froze. Then she laughed awkwardly. Maybe the calls didn't go through. Ethan never said a word. His eyes weren't on me. They were scanning every corner of the barn. The workbench, the shelves, the old grandfather clock. He was looking for the journal. "How's Grandpa?" Rachel finally asked. Grandpa didn't even look at her. He slowly turned his wheelchair away. Rachel's smile disappeared. "I guess he's still upset with me." Mrs. Alvarez's words echoed in my mind. People tell the truth without speaking. Grandpa had just said everything. Without saying a single word, Ethan walked toward the grandfather clock. "You should probably throw this thing away. It's falling apart." I stepped directly in front of it. "I like it." He smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile someone wears when they know they're losing control. Rachel suddenly clapped her hands. "Actually, we came because we wanted to help." I almost laughed. After 5 weeks? Now they wanted to help. What kind of help? "We'll stay with Grandpa tonight." "No." Rachel blinked. "What?" I said no. "You've both been too busy to visit." "I'm sure you're still busy." Neither of them liked that answer. For several uncomfortable seconds, nobody spoke. Then Ethan noticed something sticking out of Grandpa's blanket. The corner of the journal. His eyes wetted. He tried not to stare, but I'd already caught him. "So," he said casually, "what's that?" I looked down. "Oh, just one of Grandpa's old notebooks." Rachel's breathing changed. Barely noticeable, but enough. She knew exactly which notebook it was. "Can I see it?" Ethan asked. "No." His polite expression vanished. "Emma, it's probably just old memories." I said no. Rachel stepped closer. "You're making a big deal out of nothing. If it's nothing, why do you both want it so badly?" Neither answered, because they couldn't. Grandpa suddenly lifted his trembling hand. He pointed toward me, then toward the notebook. Finally, he shook his head. No, even through his illness, he was telling me not to hand it over. That was all the confirmation I needed. Rachel sighed dramatically. "Fine, if that's what you want." She turned toward the barn door. Ethan followed her. Halfway outside, he stopped. Without turning around, he quietly said, "You should really read the last chapter. But be careful. Grandpa wasn't perfect." Then they left. Their truck disappeared down the gravel road. The moment they were gone, Mrs. Alvarez walked out from behind the hay storage room. I jumped. "You were here?" She nodded. I heard voices. I stayed hidden. Did you hear what they said? Every word. She looked at the journal in my hands. They're afraid. Of what? Not the journal. The truth inside it. That evening, after Grandpa had fallen asleep, I finally opened the journal again. The handwriting began nearly 25 years earlier. At first, the entries were ordinary. Weather, harvests, family dinners, birthdays. Then, the tone changed. One page called my attention immediately. Across the top, Grandpa had written, "The day everything changed." My hands trembled as I read. "Today, Rachel asked me to lie for the first time." I frowned. Rachel? She would have been barely 16. Why would a teenager ask Grandpa to lie? I kept reading. She begged me not to tell her parents what she had done. She said it was an accident. She promised it would never happen again. My heart raced. What had she done? The next page had been ripped out. Completely. Only jagged edges remained. Someone had deliberately removed it. Not recently. Years ago. Whoever took that page knew exactly what it contained. I flipped ahead. Another missing page. Then another. Someone had gone through Grandpa's journal before, carefully removing only certain entries, which meant the journal wasn't complete. Not anymore. Then something slipped from between two pages. A small envelope, different from the first one. Across the front, Grandpa had written, "If these pages are missing." I slowly opened it. Inside was a tiny handwritten note. Only one sentence. The missing pages were never destroyed. I stared at the words. There was more. Grandpa had expected someone to steal parts of the journal. He had planned for it. I turned the note over. On the back, he had drawn a symbol map of the farmhouse. One room was circled in red. Not the office, not the barn, the old root cellar beneath the kitchen. Just then, a loud metallic sound echoed from downstairs. Clang, like someone had dropped a shovel. I looked toward the kitchen. The cellar door was slowly opening by itself. I grabbed a flashlight and ran toward the kitchen. As I reached the cellar stairs, I heard two voices whispering in the darkness. One belonged to Ethan. The other didn't belong to anyone in my family. Someone else had been searching Grandpa's secrets all along. I switched off my flashlight. The kitchen felt completely silent. Only the old refrigerator hummed softly behind me. The cellar door remained half open. I could hear voices drifting upward through the darkness. One belonged to Ethan. The other, I had never heard before. "She found the journal," the unfamiliar man whispered. "I told you we should have searched this place weeks ago." Ethan sounded frustrated. "It doesn't matter. We only need the missing pages. They're somewhere down here." My pulse raced. The missing pages. Grandpa hadn't hidden them in the barn. He'd hidden them beneath the farmhouse. Exactly where the map had led me. I quietly stepped backward before either of them could hear me. Grandpa was still asleep in his room. I hurried inside and gently woke him. His eyes opened immediately. He looked frightened the moment he saw my face. "They're here," I whispered. "Ethan and someone else." Grandpa's breathing became heavier. He reached toward the bedside table. There was a small notepad and a pencil. His hands trembled violently as he began writing. Each letter took enormous effort. Finally, he pushed the paper toward me. It read, "Not your uncle." I frowned. What uncle? Then it hit me. The strange man downstairs. For years, Ethan had always referred to someone named Uncle David. a distant relative who supposedly helped Grandpa with the farm years ago. But Grandpa had just written, "Not your uncle." Whoever was downstairs had been lying about who he really was. A floorboard creaked. The voices stopped. Someone was climbing the cellar stairs. I quickly hid Grandpa's note inside my pocket. Footsteps approached the kitchen. Then, silence. A knock came at the bedroom door. 3 slow knocks. "Ethan," I called. "It's me." I came to check on Grandpa. Wire. He hadn't checked on Grandpa in over a month. Now suddenly, he cared. I opened the door just enough to see him. His clothes were covered with dirt. Fresh dirt. From the cellar. Behind him stood a man in his early 60s. Gray beard. Weathered face. Heavy work boots. He smiled politely. "You remember David?" I looked at him. "No, I don't." His smile faded slightly. "This is Grandpa's old friend," Ethan quickly explained. "He came to help organize the basement." The basement? At 11 o'clock at night? Neither of them answered. Instead, the older man looked directly at Grandpa. For just a second, his calm expression disappeared. He looked afraid. None of me, of Grandpa, as though Grandpa recognized him. Grandpa suddenly gripped the arms of his chair so tightly, his fingers turned white. His eyes never left the stranger's face. Then, with every ounce of strength he had, Grandpa forced out one clear word. "Mason." The stranger froze. His real name wasn't David. It was Mason. Without another word, Mason grabbed Ethan's arm. "We're leaving." But now, the two of them hurried out of the farmhouse. Seconds later, their truck sped down the gravel road. I stood frozen. Why had Grandpa's single word frightened them so much? The next morning, I drove into town. The local library still kept old newspaper archives on microfilm. I searched every article mentioning Grandpa's farm over the last 30 years. Most were ordinary: harvest awards, county fairs, community events. Then, one headline caught my eye. "Local farmer cleared after business partner disappears." The article was dated 26 years earlier. Grandpa Henry Carter had once owned the farm with another man. His name, Mason Walker, the same man Ethan had introduced as Uncle David. According to the newspaper, Mason disappeared shortly after accusing Grandpa of stealing thousands of dollars from their farming business. The police investigated. No charges were ever filed. The case quietly disappeared. I stared at the article. Had Grandpa really betrayed his business partner? Or had someone rewritten history? Back at the farmhouse, Mrs. Alvarez was waiting on the porch. Before I could even greet her, she looked at the newspaper in my hand. "You found it. You knew about Mason?" She nodded. Everyone in town knew, but almost nobody knew the truth. What truth? She looked toward Grandpa, who was resting peacefully inside. Henry didn't steal from Mason. Key. Mason stole from Henry. I frowned. The newspaper says the opposite. Mrs. Alvarez smiled sadly. That's because someone paid to make sure it did. A cold shiver ran through me. Who? She slowly shook her head. I've never been able to prove it. But your grandfather spent the next 25 years collecting evidence. The journal, the missing pages, the hidden map. Everything suddenly fit together. Grandpa hadn't been documenting family memories. He had been building a case for 25 years against someone powerful enough to rewrite the truth. That evening, As I helped Grandpa into bed, he reached beneath his pillow. He handed me a folded photograph. It showed Grandpa and Mason standing beside the farmhouse when they were young. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Then I noticed something. Standing in the background, partially hidden behind an old pickup truck, was my father. I turned the photograph over. Grandpa had written only one sentence. He witnessed everything. My knees nearly gave out. Dad had been there 26 years ago, which meant Dad hadn't just known the truth. He'd lived through it. Just as I tucked the photograph into the journal, a black SUV pulled into the driveway. Two people stepped out. One wore a business suit. The other carried a thick leather briefcase. The older woman looked straight at me and quietly said, "I'm your grandfather's attorney." Then she added the sentence that changed everything. "Your father hired me before he died, and he told me not to come until Mason returned." For a moment, I simply stared at the woman standing on the porch. She couldn't have been older than 60. Professional, calm, confident. She carried herself like someone who had spent decades delivering life-changing news. The man beside her opened the leather briefcase. "My name is Evelyn Brooks," the woman said. "I've been your grandfather's attorney for 23 years. She extended her hand. "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." I looked at Grandpa through the living room window. He was asleep, peaceful, completely unaware that the secret he'd protected for more than 2 decades was finally about to surface. "You said my father hired you." "Yes, before he passed away." I frowned. My father never mentioned an attorney. He wasn't allowed to. She spoke without hesitation. "He signed a confidentiality agreement with your grandfather." My heart pounded. "Why?" "Because your grandfather believed the wrong people were still watching." She glanced toward the road. As it turns out, he was right. She placed an old manila folder on the kitchen table. Across the front, in Grandpa's handwriting, were the words, "Open only if Mason returns." My hands trembled as I broke the seal. Inside were dozens of documents, old bank statements, business contracts, canceled checks, property records, and one cassette tape. Dad had left another recording. I pressed play. Static crackled. Then, Dad's familiar voice filled the room. "Emma, if you're hearing this, Mason finally came back. I prayed he never would." I closed my eyes. Even after all these years, hearing Dad's voice still hurt. "You deserve the truth. 26 years ago, Henry and Mason owned this farm together. They trusted each other like brothers. Until Mason started stealing money from the business." Every word matched what Mrs. Alvarez had told me. Dad continued. "Grandpa discovered the missing money. He confronted Mason. Instead of admitting what he'd done, Mason blamed Henry. He forged financial records, bribed 2 witnesses, and convinced half the town that Grandpa was the thief." I felt sick. One lie had destroyed Grandpa's reputation for decades. Then Dad's voice became heavier. "There was only one person who witnessed the confrontation. Me?" I looked at Evelyn. She nodded silently. Dad had been telling the truth all along. I was 19. I wanted to testify, but Mason threatened our family. He said if I spoke, he'd make sure Henry lost the farm, and we'd lose everything. So Grandpa made the hardest decision of his life. He told me to stay silent. I couldn't believe it. Grandpa had sacrificed his own reputation to protect his family. Then came the revelation none of us expected. But Mason didn't work alone. I leaned closer. Someone inside our own family helped him. The room became perfectly still. No one breathed. Dad slowly spoke the next words. That person wasn't Ethan, wasn't Rachel, wasn't your mother. My pulse raised. Then, Dad said the name. It was my own brother, Uncle Daniel. The uncle who had moved across the country years ago. The uncle who almost never visited. The uncle everyone described as quiet. Dad continued. Daniel was drowning in debt. Mason promised him money. In exchange, he stole Grandpa's financial records. Without Daniel, Mason could never have framed Henry. I covered my mouth. All these years, our family had blamed the wrong people. But, I whispered, why were Ethan and Rachel searching for the journal? Evelyn answered, because they only knew half the story. They grew up believing the journal exposed Grandpa. They never knew. It actually cleared him. My shoulders dropped. Everything finally made sense. Rachel wasn't protecting herself. Neither was Ethan. They'd spent years believing the journal would shame Grandpa forever. They'd been manipulated by a lie that started before they were even born. Just then, a pickup truck pulled into the driveway. Rachel stepped out first. Ethan followed. Neither looked angry anymore. They looked exhausted. Rachel's eyes were red from crying. I know you found the journal, she whispered. I nodded. She looked toward Grandpa's bedroom. I was wrong. So was Ethan. We believed Uncle Daniel. He told us Grandpa ruined our family. We believed every word. Ethan slowly removed something from his jacket. Several folded notebook pages. Yellow with age. The missing pages. I took them years ago, he admitted. Uncle Daniel told me to. He said they proved Grandpa was guilty. His voice broke. I never actually read them. I unfolded the fragile pages. Grandpa's handwriting covered every inch. Not a confession. A detailed record of Mason's thefts. Names, dates, amounts, even Daniel's involvement. The proof Grandpa had been searching for had been hidden in plain sight for 20 years. 3 days later, the sheriff reopened the investigation. The old evidence, the missing journal pages, the financial records, everything was finally placed together. For the first time in 26 years, Grandpa's name was officially cleared. The newspaper printed a new headline. Local farmer exonerated after decades-old fraud uncovered. When I showed Grandpa the article, a single tear rolled down his cheek. He smiled, then quietly closed his eyes, holding my hand. Surrounded by family, he passed away peacefully, not as the man the town once doubted, but as the honest man he had always been. Months later, we didn't sell the farmhouse. We restored it. Rachel left her business every Saturday to help. Ethan repaired the old rat bar himself. Mrs. Alvarez still brought fresh bread every Tuesday. And inside Grandpa's office, the black leather journal rests behind glass. Not because it's valuable, but because it reminds us of one lesson. Grandpa spent 25 years teaching without saying a word. The truth may take years to catch up, but it never stops walking. Every time I unlock Grandpa's office, I still hear the old clock ticking, and I remember the day my family told me that caring for Grandpa was seeing my responsibility. At the time, I thought they had given me the greatest burden. I never imagined they had actually given me the greatest privilege of my life.